Well, welcome to the I Got Fired podcast for people who have been fired or afraid that they might be. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Mark Anthony Dyson, who is a professional career advice writer. I love following your stuff on LinkedIn, Mark. It's always super helpful and insightful. And I've been honored to be a guest on your show, and now I'm glad to have you on mine. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's wonderful.
And so tell us, you have a blog as well, Voice of Job Seekers, is that right?
Yes, the Voice of Job Seekers is my blog and also the podcast.
Yeah, right. Yes, your own podcast. So I highly recommend folks who are in the job market to check that out. And I wanted to have you on because, of course, a lot of our clients are in a position where are leaving a job or
Hmm.
been kicked out of a job and they're in the job market. And often they refer them to you. And as you and I were talking before we signed on, I was originally going to have you on, and was going to send out an invitation to talk about what was going on in 2020. And now we've got a whole new topic to talk about.
Yes, we do.
It is crazy times for all of us. So I will let you start. So what, for folks who are out there who are in the job market, what now?
What now? The people who are still hiring, for the most part, the larger hirers, the ones like Amazon, are still hiring. And in fact, Amazon has upped this game. Not only they're hiring, I believe it's 100,000 workers, but they also have given raises to most of their workers up to a minimum wage of $15 an hour. So that's a goodie for those who are in that particular situation. The other part of the market that seems to be growing in interest is what's going to happen with the hotel travel industry,
Right.
anything that's connected to that, as well as the healthcare industry. Healthcare industry was in need 3 weeks ago. It's going to be a paradigm shift. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but there's a lot of different and very interesting things that are going on right now. But basically, if you're looking for a job, continue to look for a job. Basically, your ideal job now will be remote, which could change the game. Then there's plenty of sites to go to. The like remote.co is one place. Flex Jobs is another. It is a premium service that you would have to pay. You can get a free 2 weeks, and you can pay for 2 weeks, or you can pay for a year, which is the best offer that they have. And there's other places as well that are they're promoting remote jobs. In fact, I wouldn't doubt that soon we won't have to say something is remote. Maybe it will be just outlined as a job, and you can expect to work remotely. But we don't know how long that's going to last, and we don't know what that's going to look like. But there is a major shift in the way that we're going to be looking at our careers from now on.
Yeah, it's funny. You and I were just talking before we got on about our respective offices, and you and your wife are playing musical offices at home.
Yes.
So it's a new landscape, and I know you have been, and my law firm has primarily been remote. I mean, we do have a brick and mortar office, so we
Right.
fortunately, with this change, we're able to move fairly seamlessly to just completely remote. Um, but I think it'll be interesting to see how this completely changes the landscape. And because people are going to have to develop new skills, both employers and employees. As you know, remote workplaces, there are many upsides to a remote workplace. I think we can all, don't have to think too hard about what those would be. But there
Mhm.
are some challenges with a remote workplace, and you know, I found in my firm, you have to be very intentional about maintaining communication. Otherwise, people just get siloed even more so in their own, because you're not even having that organic, water cooler kind of talk.
Absolutely. And, you know, there was a discussion I was involved in LinkedIn earlier, it's an ongoing discussion about what employers are going to say and what our employers are saying. And I think job seekers need to take note of who's kicking and screaming going into the remote process, as well as those who are ready.
Yeah.
Of course, it helps when you're with an employer that's ready, that has sort of a disaster recovery program that's in place, and that there's a seamless part of the process. The others that are struggling. I know I wrote an article the other day on some tools that people can use if they need to start remote before the rest of the team, which there are some cases that they do. Then there are tools that are available that are even free of charge, and you don't necessarily have to, it costs you anything. And
Sure.
even the team can use until maybe the IT department gets their act together and provides that desktop virtual workplace that they would rather have, rather than using the tools that are on the outside.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like what we're using right now, Zoom is our,
Yep.
I wish I owned stock in Zoom about right now. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, right. That
Good.
that would have been perfect, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I think you can use Zoom for free. I mean, I think you're limited in like you have like a half hour before it cuts off and you have to start a new conversation. But for most people that's plenty. And I even think the paid service is not that much. Um, and these articles you're referring to, people can find them on your blog and
Oh,
on
oh,
LinkedIn?
well, actually, I can send you the link to it so you could put it in the
That'd
show
be great.
notes.
That'd be perfect.
There's one that is on job-hunt.org. If you put in that and put in my name, Mark Anthony Dyson, you'll find the articles that I've written there.
Yeah.
It's a job site that's been around for more than 20 years, and it's quite useful. Millions of job seekers go to there to get job search information every year.
Yeah.
Giving my friend Susan Joyce a shout out on your show, if you don't mind. But it is,
Absolutely.
but it is there's a series of remote articles that people can get a hold of, and they'll find a lot of nationally recognized writers there to give the best information up to date as possible. But
Yeah.
as I was thinking, as I was talking, had this vision of that scene from Forrest Gump where for some industries, it's like that scene in Forrest Gump where there was storm and rain, and Forrest Gump and the captain,
Yeah. On
Lieutenant
the
Dan
boat.
was a lot
Yeah.
right.
The
And
shrimp,
then
shrimp boat.
when it came to daylight, they were the only competition in the
Right. And they were hauling it in. That's right. I remember.
yeah. And this is kind of like that for some industries
Yes.
where the storms have gone, and here you are in the space, and for some that are prepared, are they going to be the likely employer? One of the things that I think, one industry I think that might be ideal now might be the green industry. The green industry, where the further west you work, the more opportunities you have for green, and necessarily you don't have to work in that state I
Yeah.
mean, to be in that state in order to work. In fact, I think still DeVry University has a whole green education department where they're dedicated to training people for green careers. But having said that, this is a time when you can also get in on, those of you who don't have degrees, you could get in on a fairly decent level and get pretty decent pay, because you're able to work remote, and if you have some technical agility, you might find yourself getting at a pretty low point entry for some of those jobs.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. Let me actually, I'm going to have a little experiment here. Um, First time live on the I Got Fired podcast. I'm going to see if I can share my screen with you.
Okay, all right, let's do
Let's
it.
see. And then I'm going to see if this will work. Go. Let's see. I don't think it's going to let me do it. I have to, oh
Okay.
no, maybe let's see. Let's see.
This is interesting because I'm doing a webinar this evening on Zoom, and I got a presentation to share. So if it works for you,
All right.
there we go.
Can you see it?
Nice,
Can you
yes,
see it? All right.
very nice.
Let's see if I can, here we go. All right. So I got Google up. You can see my screen. All right.
Yes.
I wonder if the recording can. Anyway, I guess we'll find out. We'll do this quickly. Give me the job site you mentioned?
Job-hunt.org.
Hunt.org.
Yep.
All right. And so you can see this okay on your screen.
Yeah, I can see it.
I'll be curious if it comes up in the recording. I assume there will be. So here we go. For, if this works and you guys can see it, job-hunt.org.
You got to have the dash in there.
Yeah, the dash for a shorter, smarter job search. Here we go. So, all right, yeah, increase your work efficiency.
Yep.
From
And
home,
there's my article, Increase Your Work from Home Efficiency, 9 Handy Tools for Remote Workers. That's mine.
There we go. Okay. All right, guys. Well, here it is. This is how you find it. Okay. All right, we'll stop the share now. Very good.
Okay.
Yeah, for the first time. Hopefully that took. Well, let me
Yeah.
ask you this: how maybe on a site like that, but how, as you mentioned, there are, while some industries are getting hammered, hopefully just in the short term, but clearly travel, service industry is really dire straits. But there are some clearly that are going to be booming. Like you mentioned, Amazon hiring 100,000 new drivers. Healthcare, as you mentioned, it's going to be a big one. And some of this is going to be evolving, right? I think
Sure.
as the job market changes, there are people out there now, I'm sure, coming up with new ways to meet this need of people primarily working at home. But
Sure.
how do you stay abreast of these sorts of developments? Is it that Job-Hunt site or others? Like, how would I know where to point my efforts to in places that might be hiring?
Well, part of it, as a writer, I have to read a lot, and I probably keep up with about 70 or 80 different blogs at different times. So most people are not going to be able to do it. If you're going to keep up with a few of them, that's one of them. I like to think that I try to keep up with the new trends. So definitely mine. There are, if you want to keep up with career and maybe salary information, go to payscale.com.
Yeah.
Of course, is another place I write, and another place where I write as well as Glassdoor.com. All of those are great. Payscale and Glassdoor provide content Monday through Friday, all of the time, and plus they have a very large library as well as a jobhunt.org. So those are just a few of the places where people can really find. Of course, there's some that will focus on one aspect of employment than the others. I think you should keep up with the Bureau of Labor Statistics, just to get an idea what the outlook is going to look, especially now. They're starting to update that site every day, as well as there's so many others that I can probably list. But yeah, I keep up with a lot. And of course, I talk to a lot of those writers and the career coaches and resume writers and people in the career profession. I'm talking with them daily, even on Sundays, because there's so much happening, especially now.
I bet. What about, like, obviously networking, face-to-face networking is for now going to be going by the wayside. Hopefully it comes back soon. But how about for folks, like, what about the tools to apply and network? What are your recommendations there?
You should you should join industry organizations. That's really the pulse of movement and what's going on. Not so much even as getting something posted online, but people are moving all the time and people are announcing movement all the time. So joining your industry's LinkedIn groups, especially if they're active. Join the most active ones, even if you're just looking. I encourage you to get involved in those discussions, but even just to look and to see what's going on and see what's up on the horizon. Those groups are very helpful on LinkedIn as well as Facebook, and also just the paid membership that you would join those organizations. If you're working now, this is a good time to go ahead and be involved, so that for even if something happens within the next year, you have access to the information. And of course, whatever, of course, the people you are connected to, which hopefully in some of your past jobs in the industry, you keep up with some of the managers and directors and people who move on. They're also a good barometer, maybe not so much at giving you direct information, but to see their movement could give you an idea what kind of opportunities are available.
Yeah, yeah. Do you see like virtual networking events or folks doing those things?
Well, everything is virtual pretty much in my world, to separate it. But there are networking events, there are conferences that have been canceled are going to networking, the virtual conferences,
Yeah,
and of course, it doesn't take much to be a part of that. Some of them are prepared, and I can't think of the conferences there. I'm kind of waiting for a couple of my industry conferences to go virtual. uh but some people aren't that swift yet, so give it a couple of more weeks and you'll probably see a litany of conferences that are virtual you can just attend. And they're kind of cool because a lot of them, they'll have something that'll be available year round, not year round, but for 24 hours, but they're pre-recorded, so you
yeah,
can go in and listen in anytime you want. And you can also wait for the all to record, and a lot of them will sell it to you for the ones that you need, and that's a great way. But if there anytime you can get into some chats or some situations where there are some discussions and discussion boards, uh, be a part of that, because that's essential, to have that dialogue yourself instead of just being a voyeur.
yeah,
You really get the most out of participation. And if I would say so myself, the conferences that I've always been to, I get more out of the networking aspect than I do the actual class,
yeah,
in
sure.
most cases. So highly encourage that kind of type of contact, as well as LinkedIn is an ongoing, living, breathing, not only document, but it's kind of a water cooler workplace, as we talked about before, where it's right there in front of you. It's like if you were talking to someone by a water cooler.
Yeah.
Just don't look, participate, and be involved. You'd be surprised. I was featured in an article on LinkedIn, where there are still comments being made on it after a month.
Wow.
Uh, and it was about being fired. And there was one person who said that they were fired that day, and that they were kind of discouraged. And that same day, they were also contacted by 2 or 3 recruiters for help. So participating has its benefits, especially if you're at the right place and right time. And there are several people who were reached out to through recruiters. Hopefully they were legit.
Yeah.
But the opportunities sometimes in conversations leads to other opportunities and possibilities.
Yeah. That's interesting. It just occurs to me, and you've probably written about this or certainly thought about it, just the difference, almost in the same way we're talking about the difference between working remotely or working in an office.
Right.
If you're at the physical conference, like you say, the networking is obviously often the biggest part of it. But a
Hmm.
lot of it, at least traditionally, and I know there are other forms now, but a lot of it usually happens like in the hallways, at the bar, whatever, at dinner not that night. And now, with virtual, you don't have those types of opportunities. But I guess you're right. I'm just trying to figure out how to replicate that, or maybe you don't. Maybe it's just a matter of you've got to speak up, you've got to participate. Um, because you don't have those nonverbal cues. You don't have all those, like I remember this was years ago,
Hmm.
a attorney friend of mine who was building her practice and didn't have a lot of extra income at the time. And she would
Hmm.
go to industry conferences and she wouldn't even sign up because she couldn't afford to at the time. She's doing quite well now,
Right.
but she would just hang out there. And as people were coming out and going to the bars and socializing, she would network and talk to people.
Hmm.
Now you don't have that. I don't know what question I have here. Is that being replicated? Is it being replaced by something else?
Um, hacking a conference we're talking about.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Surprise.
Anything, even if you are legitimately at it, and
Okay.
you kind of
Okay.
wait around and wait in the wings till you see somebody breaking off from the friends. If you want to talk to somebody, you just don't have those same kind of
Sure.
tools now.
Sure. Professional development is a way to kind of get some of that, um, you know, and sometimes it's a great situation where if you're signing up for a class online, of course, that's also an opportunity to connect with other people within that class. You'd be surprised that there are those that where there's not a lot of networking, but there could be opportunities to network if you, there are universities that are offering free classes like MIT and I think UC Berkeley and some UCLA at one point. I don't know if they are or not right now, but I know MIT has been ongoing for nearly 10 years now, to where you could attend those classes for free. Some of them, warning is maybe some older classes that they put out there that maybe some of that information might be obsolete, but then you can go and find the contributors to those classes, the people who taught them, and some of them will even have something else up to date on YouTube.
Yeah.
And YouTube has a comment section,
Yeah.
and you can get in on the comment section and
Right.
start to build some equity there. They might have even other groups that are virtual where you could join for no cost. But having said that, there's a lot of value in paying for some of those classes. Whatever you can and wherever you can. Of course, there you get the real-time relationships, and you get to connect with people who are like you, or even are just trying to brush up on the industry and may have those industry connection. I think every connection in every possible way these days is a network situation, even if it's in a comment section, even
Yeah.
if it's on LinkedIn or Facebook. It's a matter of how you present yourself, and you can't go begging, but if you go as a resource, you'll have people come to you,
Yeah.
perhaps. And it's kind of a 360 approach, where if you're used to pursuing jobs all the time, maybe through your expertise, people can pursue you. So that's why blogging, vlogging, podcasts are still viable ways for you to present yourself and to bring people to you, and perhaps opportunities along with it.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. And there's still, I think that's a great point. Like, don't just think, if you're a job seeker, about, of course, you're trying to get job opportunities and you should be asking for those, but think about how
Sure.
you can give to your network, whether it's, and it doesn't have to be job related, or at least related to your career. Like if you can
Hmm.
teach something on whatever it is, crossword puzzles, how to play guitar, I think anytime you can be seen as an authority on anything,
Right.
that attracts people to you, and it sparks conversation. And then of course there's
Hmm.
also, are you familiar with any of Bob Berg's stuff, Endless Referrals
I've
and
heard the name.
Go Giver? He's got some great material out there, but basically,
Hmm.
that's what he talks about a lot. And one of his big recommendations, which is, of course, as old as this, we've had mail. It's like snail mail.
Yeah.
Send thank you notes, send like,
Yeah.
if you, I think sometimes people, and I see this, with attorneys who are trying to grow their practice and they're trying to network perhaps with more senior attorneys, and they're like, well, what do I have to offer them? Like, I can't send them a referral to a Fortune 500 company. And I tell them, like, well, you can give them your attention.
Right.
Like, the truth is, like, even very important people, half the time people aren't listening to them. Like, if you really listen to somebody, and if they tell
Hmm.
you something that, they're into boating, or they're into whatever it is, and then you just, maybe something about boating, or you're looking, like, you find an article, you
Sure.
know, do it old school. If you have a hard copy, cut it out of the newspaper, because who does that anymore? Nobody. And you stand out if you send that hard copy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that just reminds me so much of something I think is real important is follow up.
Yes.
Your follow-up is in every single stage is valuable to an employer,
Yeah.
especially if you're being recruited. Recruiters are working with 25, 30, 35, 40 people, sometimes in the past, depending upon the situation. So if somebody doesn't call you, you call them.
Right. Over and
Or,
without being,
or
what did somebody say to me one time? Being diplomatically persistent.
yes, yes. Or even just passively persistent. Say, hey, glad we had a great conversation. Hope all things are well. By the way,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
could, what's the update on my situation?
Yeah.
And that will help you stand out. And sometimes that's all it is.
Yeah.
So, don't be so fast to dismiss it to ghosting and all these things that we hear people say. Take your second and maybe even third shot
Sure.
at of doing that. But follow up is essential. While you're following up, you can also show how you're valuable, even more valuable, depending upon where you are in the interview process. Let's say you had that third interview and they're supposed to get back to you in a week, and it's been a week and a half. Maybe say, hey, I like to, it could be simple as an email, or it could be a little card. Say, hey, I want to just thank you again for the opportunity. I was a part of this LinkedIn discussion, and I had some comments. Maybe you should see. I'd like to know what you think. And you can actually send the link to the conversation in LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So it's a really cool tool. So if you just want them to see you interacting, or some valuable information might be valuable to them, that might be the time to do it as well. But don't let silence be silence, because then they think that that you've moved on.
Yeah.
So you don't want to get that impression.
Definitely. I know sometimes like somebody will have sent me an email and I'm not the best at staying on top of keeping, I don't do inbox zero as well as I should.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes it'll come back to me later and I'm like, oh, wow, I know this person sent me something and I can't remember their name or I can't remember their email and it's buried now. And if they had
Mhm.
just, and I want to respond or, it's just because I got busy and I just, for whatever I was traveling and I just get into that email. And sometimes, I've had them email me again. I'm like, thank goodness okay, now I can respond because I've been, I jogged my memory. So I think it's a good point. Just because somebody doesn't respond doesn't mean they don't want to. It could be they've got, poor email hygiene like I do, and your email's gotten buried under, 400 emails and they would otherwise respond. They just were busy.
Yeah.
I always appreciate if somebody, hey, just checking back in on this, because it does help.
Yeah, it sure does. And there's some of the toys of email that I don't particularly use all the time because they're not the greatest. And sometimes that just takes a while to see what you get a response, where you get a response, and where you hear silence. Check your spam folder.
Yeah.
Is a good place
Yeah.
to start.
Sure.
But especially Gmail is the greatest thing in the world to use, and you can search it. I've got about 10 years worth of emails in my Gmail, but that little search button, the search place in the top, by putting in the name, and that person is still using that email, it'll still come up
Yeah.
even
Sure.
after all these years.
Yeah.
I think recently I was looking for something from 2014, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And I want to create some content out of that. And I found that email by using a search. So don't dismiss it if you don't see it right away, or that you may be discouraged. Most email boxes have a search function that's quite functional. Gmail is the best. If you don't have a Gmail, get one today. It's
Yeah,
really
no, and it also now has a reminder function. Like it'll
yes.
show me emails like, hey, you haven't responded to this in 5 days. So some of the technology does it for you.
Yes.
You mentioned YouTube just a minute ago. I don't, LinkedIn is an obvious, is obviously the powerhouse for job seekers.
Sure.
Do you any tips for, I use YouTube all the time for how-to videos, like how do I do this? How do I do that? What would you say about using YouTube as a job search tool?
Uh, you can look for information through as a tool through YouTube. There's some that actually live stream some events, and you can catch it right there as if you're watching TV as it's happening. You can also find information on how to do everything from resume writing to networking to actually, the first day that you onboard to a company. It'll help answer some of the questions you may have an employer. What I love about YouTube is finding out about an employer. Like if they make a claim like we're really diverse, then what I'll go is go to YouTube to see if they actually have a channel, um, to not just a company website and pictures, but to see actually how diverse are they,
Yeah.
and to see if they actually have representation of people that look like me, or people that or groups that I care about that are not traditionally championed. There's a lot of ways to use YouTube. In fact, as soon as you look through YouTube, go to YouTube and search for the same information. Many times you'll find some things that Google doesn't show, even though Google and YouTube are married.
Yeah.
YouTube is its own search engine in a lot of ways, especially when the provider doesn't have a lot of content out there that may not be ranking in Google.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's true. Do you see recruiters or job professionals using YouTube in that way?
I haven't seen them use a lot of it for initial recruiting. I see them a lot on LinkedIn and Twitter, and a few on Facebook. Um, Many have migrated to Instagram. Some are a little apprehensive of maybe TikTok. That's something that's upcoming. But the big one is LinkedIn and Twitter for sure for recruiters. Many of them don't have necessarily big accounts, and some of them do, and some of them make themselves known. And they attract really great talent because of their presence, because they're trying to be helpful to job seekers. They give you insight on the employer brand. And that's that's a way to also, for a job seeker to research the company, is to see what kind of presence the company has on those places as well. A lot of intel could be obtained through just again, just looking for a company, join the company page, liking company stuff, maybe even starting a conversation with someone. Facebook is good for that too, and I've got to say I can't discount that. You can go to a company's Facebook page, and if you need to know who you can send an email to contact, you can. Sometimes the Facebook moderator is not somebody that's necessarily employee of the company, but they've employed somebody to run the social media. They can find out that information and get back to you, and they're more than enthusiastic to do it. There are times when I've gotten information through Facebook page moderator, and they don't have any skin in the game other than running the page.
Yeah.
So of course they'll be glad if you're looking for a job. They'll be more helpful, enthusiastic about it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good insight. I hadn't thought about that. Well, listen, we're coming up on the end of our time here.
Okay.
Any other final pieces of advice how people can job search in this coronavirus era?
Yeah, and I think I've submitted before in many different forms, and people who follow me on my podcast and follow my writing have known me for, is that job search is a lifestyle now. It's
Yeah.
not something that you can just compartmentalize. It has to become part of your life. And I think when I said that on LinkedIn, there's a couple of people who said, well, we're supposed to do something else now. I said, well, you already do something else. You're swiping left and right on on Tinder.
Right. Right.
You are looking at pictures on Facebook. You're arguing with people on politics. I think we need to employ a little bit of job search intelligence here. Is that you've got to cut some things out to kind of keep a linear line on your industry, because now, if you don't believe me, the job search can change overnight, literally.
Yes.
And you have this disaster. Now, what do we do? You know, the fact that we are in a recession, it may be a passive recession,
Yeah.
and we can argue about the terms,
Yeah.
but you know, that always affects the job market. So you've got to be ready to make a move and also be agile when you hear news like that, or maybe you knew it was coming because you had your finger on the pulse. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
You don't have to peruse a job board to be active job seeker. To keep your job search on fire, you could be developing your skills, honing your skills. You could be marketing yourself. You could be involved in networking, which is something that we do, whether we think or not. Whether it's productive, that might be the question.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the job search is a lifestyle now. You can't let it ride for a year. You'll be light years behind.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. Well, Mark Anthony Dyson, thank you so much for
Yes, sir.
joining me. And it's the voice of job seekers. Folks, check out Mark's blog and his podcast, and of course, his great writing on LinkedIn. And you can find me at spiegellaw.com. Also, my book, You're Pregnant, You're Fired. And we wish everybody the best in this ever-changing environment we got here.
Good
All
deal.
right. Thanks, Mark.
Sure. Thank you.